Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Connect Beyond. I'm your host, Amaya, Miss Illinois Collegiate America. Connect Beyond is a series that sits down with teachers who are going the extra mile to connect with students beyond a typical classroom setting and creating a respectful environment. This week, I'm sitting down with Ms Gruca, an English teacher at John F. Kennedy Middle School in my hometown of Plainfield, Illinois. She was nominated for the 2019 Life Changer of the Year Award and received recognition from National Life's education program. She is also the sponsor of JFK's Poetry Club. Let's hear what she has to say. We are back with another episode of Connect Beyond. I am with Ms Gruca, who is a special guest, but you guys will find out why later. But for now, go ahead and introduce yourself and what grade you teach and kind of your role in education.
My name is Ms Gruca, and I've been teaching for 17 years in Plainfield School District. I specialize in 8th grade, but I've taught 6th grade through 8th grade, and then in college. I did a year at Joliet Junior College. I am the sponsor of Poetry Club, and that's been really important. I sponsored Falcon TV, which was a student-created news. And recently, the last couple of years, I've been traveling and being a leader to bring students and their families and community members to international trips.
We were just talking about this before we started recording, but I am currently a junior in college, and I had Ms Gruca not as a teacher, but I was in Falcon TV, the group in our middle school, and I was like, I had to be 13 or so 8 years ago. That kind of served as like a news channel or platform for the students in our middle school, and I talked about different things on there with some of the other co-hosts, and I truly think that was the first introduction I had to media and content creation and, planning scripts and working with other students. So I just have to thank you for that experience, because it was one that I will never forget. I think in high school I found like our old footage and I cringe at it, but it just taught me so much. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it was awesome to see. I tried to keep it so flexible that you guys could come up with anything. And I was open to all the ideas, and a lot of students who didn't really necessarily do good traditionally in class got to use their creativity, and it was just a different part of, the brain really. To be able to see that part of a student was really cool.
Another thing that you're heavily involved in at JFK is the Poetry Club. Now, I never had a chance to be involved in it, but I always went to like the open mic nights and the things that you hosted within your classroom with, was it Harold and Binky? Are those their names? Am I getting that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that and how you've been able to use poetry as a tool to connect with your students.
Absolutely. It started with 4 students that came to me, and they knew I was doing a little bit with poetry. I went to high school with Emerald Green and Lawrence Binky Tollfree. So I knew a little bit about it. They would have spoken word shows that after college, they're like, come to our show. So I went, and it was different. It was absolutely different than what poetry I had studied in college or in high school. That I was not into poetry. I hated all classic poetry. Didn't make sense to me. There were a couple of professors in my college that got me into a little bit of it and writing it for sure, but it was still very traditional. And so spoken word poetry was, performance poetry in a the sun rises way. And I was very excited to be able to hear about real issues, about real people, and figuring out that's the way that students are connecting with each other. Even if it's not my story that I'm listening to, I can understand your story a little bit more. And I think that when you open that up in the classroom, of course, and when we have 80 different languages spoken at our middle school. So we have so many different backgrounds and cultures that I don't think people realize, because they've went to school with them since kindergarten, how different maybe our homes are, and our languages and our cultures and our beliefs. So to be able to use spoken word poetry and more of inner poetry, I don't know, it's not that classic poetry, that they're able to tell their story. And then the performance bit of it allows the audience to understand and hear and appreciate it. So with those 4 students, they started out in their church. And then I was like, let's do this. So then we got involved with competitive poetry, and it grew from there. And now we sort of have a mailing list of, I think, 200 email addresses, all the way from 6th grade through beyond college. You know, a lot of those originals are out of college and have babies and families. They're 24, 25 years old now. So it's really been a cool way of bringing in Chicagoland artists, local people, into the school and put them in front of students and say, you don't have to be a poet, but look what they're doing, using their voice, using performance. You know, some are musicians. They're using the written and the verbal in order to make a whole living. It kind of makes poetry cool, right? When you have 20 somethings coming in and doing and being really good at what they do and captivating an audience, suddenly it makes like, well, poetry's not so bad now, you know? And so I trick them, and I don't go back to the classics. I don't get into the textbooks. That's where it's like going beyond, is definitely, it's bringing in the local artists. I think that's a connection right there, Chicagoland artists. And even though we're out here in the suburbs, it's more relatable than someone that's not from the area doing this.
I think you expose your students to like a whole different world. Like you said, people can make a living out of this. And a lot of times kids will come in, and I remember this even during my time at JFK, they would come in kind of like unsure, like, okay, what is this? And then they would write one piece and perform one piece. And I'm like, is that same kid in my math class who never raised his hand, or the same kid in science who just didn't understand the material? It's just like a whole different world, and you're equipping kids with the confidence to say like, hey, you can be good at this one thing, and you can talk about some of the things that you're going through and express your emotions and perform in front of a large audience. That's another thing too, like the whole public speaking aspect of it. I think I read somewhere that like public speaking is the number one fear, but kids are able to attack that like in middle school through the poetry club and just the tools that you've given them and exposing them to different poets as well.
No, I appreciate that, because I feel like that you don't have to be book smart because it's your story, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have all the resources you need, like here and here. And I think that, I mean, of course you're being vulnerable, so that's something that's really scary, but anybody can do it. Everybody can do it. There's something really healing about reading. I mean, and I'll read my own poetry. I'll read my own stories. I'll share what I'm going through. And I think that teachers need to open up more and be more vulnerable to their students, because a lot of times people, you know, the students, you kind of put teachers on this weird pedestal, and like, you don't think they have a life. You don't think that they go through anything. And when I read things about, you know, I just lost my mom this summer, so I did a lot of stuff working with that. And a lot of the kids would come out and be like, well, I can totally relate. You know, my dad died last summer, you know, or whatever. And there's some kind of magic that when you do share a piece of your story with someone, it suddenly doesn't have that weight. Like there's like some magic with the healing. And I think that that's what more of us need. I don't care what age you are, but especially in 8th grade. But the things that they write about, that's where their strength comes from. And that's where that freedom comes from. And a lot of times they won't share it with their families, or they won't share it, but they'll put it in a talent show and do it in front of 200 people. Yeah. But they won't invite their parent. Like, it's so backwards to me, but I'm trying to understand the fact that that's like the beginnings, and they feel more safe without, you know, necessarily sharing it with who it's about, one way or the other, whether it's good or bad.
It's creating an environment of vulnerability and authenticity, and that's not something that I've experienced much with teachers. And so I think by you just opening up the platform and the forum to do that, it will inspire not only other students, but also other teachers as well.
A lot of teachers have told me, because I did some conferences at University of St. Francis, and I was a speaker trying to promote, you know, spoken word poetry in the classroom. And they'll say, they're like, I'm just so afraid because of the unknown of what they could say. well, so you're afraid of your students? Like you can't control, I guess you can control a textbook and there's a right or a wrong answer, right? And you can control a test and there's a right or a wrong, and that's real safe. But I would not be teaching for 17 years if that's how I played this. And I think bringing in the real teachers, the real artists and musicians, performers, that's where this doesn't become mundane for me or my students.
What would you say to a teacher or someone in education who is looking for ways to connect to their students, whether that be through poetry or through really any other art form or just simply through their curriculum? How would you navigate like connecting beyond with your students?
I learned really early on that when they tell you, well, make sure you do like an interest survey and figure out who likes soccer and who likes cheerleading, and then get some soccer books and then give the cheerleaders cheerleading books. And I'm like, that is, you know what I mean? Like that's, no. But that's, as a first year teacher, that's kind of what you're told to do, because they'll suddenly love reading if you put something in their hand that they're already into. And I mean, yeah, for sure. Like, interests and, representation matters. So like, I get that. But I also think that middle school especially, and going into high school, their story is the only one that matters to them at this point. And in order to understand and appreciate someone else's story, they have to understand their own. So when it comes to going beyond and making those connections, it's giving the kids a space to be creative, whether that is through speaking or writing or building or dancing or, fill in the blank, cooking. Like, I think there's so many different things. Instead of just telling them how it has to be and what the right answer is, I think it's just a matter of teachers need to open their minds a little bit that we need to let them be a little bit more expressive and creative and let that be okay.
I love this because I think education is evolving so much and kind of the lines are being blurred between learning and just like exploring. I know that when I was in school, the only reason I knew I wanted to do like journalism and communications is because of outlets like Falcon TV and just doing like different classes or different exercises in my English class where we had to do public speaking or presentations. And so sometimes when people say, or when kids say they don't know what they want to do, it's because they just haven't explored what is out there and the different outlets you can explore and passions you can have. So making sure that you're providing those resources and that exposure for your students, I really think is key.
Yeah, that and letting go, right? So teachers like to control and to dictate what's going to happen and what people are going to say, especially online, right? So we have this weird, strange world of being online and everybody's muted. And, and we were told like, you better mute them all. Like, and we got in this really like weird, if someone says something, you're ready to like hit the button to like abort, and we've went completely 100 steps backwards when it comes to like, and the kids they become little robots. And now that we have people in hybrid, they are still muted, even in person. Mm-hmm. They are not talking. They're not even talking to each other. They're so like stunted socially. And it was such a safer world for teachers because it was very predictable. Like, look, nobody's going to talk. No, they're all going to do this. These are the right answers. And there isn't any creativity. Like even in drawing, it was all like digital, like put a clip art instead because people didn't even know, how to make this work. So I am excited to get back into sort of the traditional, openness. But even before, I think some teachers are afraid to let go of the control because they're afraid. I mean, even Falcon TV that we did, we were I was like, yeah, tell me your ideas for the segments. Let me see if I can get it cleared and go do it, Mm-hmm. And the other teachers were like, oh my gosh, how can you just, trust that they're going to get it done and they're going to stay out of trouble? And I'm like, you have to trust them, and if the segment isn't what they thought it was going to be, they're going to learn, and natural consequences, people are going to talk about them in the hallway and then they're going to change it. you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the same thing with poetry club. And if you get up and perform, it might be great, but then you see all of these other ones that are even better. It's like anything, sports or whatever. I'm going to get better then because I want to show you the growth. I think there is some kind of like competitiveness with that creativity and the talent. But if the teachers aren't allowing the opportunity and giving the control back to the students, then I don't think it can be taught at school. I wouldn't be teaching if I was not allowed to let go of the control and to give the opportunities. And I think that that's why teacher burnout is so prevalent, because I know a lot of districts and administration doesn't allow that.
I talk to a lot of young girls. I talk to a Girl Scout troop, and I talk to a class at Liberty, and seeing how vocal and creative they are. And if they get into high school and that's kind of shut down or that's not welcomed or accepted, think about how they're going to be when they get to college and just pick a major that they think makes a lot of money, or pick a major that they think they will enjoy. We were talking about this, like following your passion and knowing really what you want to do. It'll definitely negatively impact our society. So hopefully with forums like this and with teachers like you who are looking to kind of break that and give the students the control, that won't happen.
I think that needs to be happening not only with education, but also, in so many different ways in music, right? So the piano teacher wants to play this book, and this is the same one they've been using 30 years. Like, the kids aren't interested in that, so it's trying to find the passion and the interest so that you're actually doing it because you want to do it and not because you're forced to do it, right? And I think that school has been a forced situation. And, I don't know, how are you going to figure out your passions if you're not exposed to a whole bunch of different things?
For me, it really relied on like extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
So I was involved in Jack and Jill and things through my church. And I went to like different journalism programs during the summer. But unfortunately, not everybody is privileged enough to have those opportunities. So I know like the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA offers things. So, I mean, maybe we can push that if the school is not providing those chances, but yeah, we'll just.
Well, and I think providing resources to parents, because I think a lot of times parents, I know my parents had no idea about any scholarships. They didn't have me in any extracurricular besides, the sports at school and in middle school, and things like that. But I try to, as a parent, I feel like it's a mistake on their part for not saying, look at all of this that you could be doing. Mm-hmm. And so my sons and I were talking about how we've tried 9 different activities, whether it's sports or dance and music and karate and all of these things. And I'm like, not pick one, but like, which one are you pulled towards most? What's going to grow body and what's going to grow brain? So right now they're in piano and karate, and I'm like, and that's fine for now. And then when you do find something that you're passionate about, I'm going to be behind it 100%. But at least you've been exposed to all of these random things, because you'll never know if, unless you try it.
That's exactly what my parents did. I was in all the activities. I did sign language class, gymnastics, dance, what else? Soccer. Like, I'm not an athlete. I don't do stuff like that. But once I found pageants, I just fell in love, and that's the thing that I've stuck to. And it's given me so many opportunities and just areas to grow and develop into a young woman and a young lady, and knowing how to present myself and conduct myself, and the importance of giving back and helping the community, and recognizing my privilege and doing my best to grant those opportunities to other people who may not be as fortunate. So on Connect Beyond, the one question that I leave with all of my guests is kind of an explanation of what the Miss High School America organization is and what it stands for. So it is a national pageant system, and our platform is against bullying. And actually it's called BRAVE, so building respect and values for everyone. So my question to you, Ms. Gruca, is how do you build a respectful environment in your classroom and combat bullying?
That definitely is about our circle of trust, is what I call it. And that is something that really scared me. So we're talking about teachers giving up control, right, and being vulnerable. And it's actually a writing group that I write with in Chicago. They do it, and you sit in a circle and you're reading your best poem from the last 2 weeks or whatever. And that's where the magic happens and people start connecting. But it also, you can see if there's a couple of jerks out there that aren't bought into the circle of trust, right? They can really say some really harmful things that could kill all your trust, because now you're not going to have anybody come in the next 2 weeks with anything as vulnerable and exposing as what they've done, because they feel like they're going to be used as a weapon against them. If and when I see it, I take it very seriously. And I think that, instead of pretending to ignore it or looking the other way, sometimes teachers do that. That is absolutely how you're not going to create that safe environment. I think that I've never really had a problem with it. In the beginning, a little bit, but then they start realizing that most of the class is bought into it and they will be kicked out and you won't be invited to come back next time. You can go somewhere, because not everybody's going to respect everybody else's stories. And I understand that. I'm a realist that way, but you're not going to be invited to the party, and we're about to get this work, whether you're here or not. Teachers, of course, are responsible for making sure that people feel protected when they're in their classroom. That is what I've always tried to do and what I continue to strive for. We all have work to do. We all make mistakes, so we say things, but calling it out and letting people know that that's not right. And then not just being one person, but collectively a group to say, no, we're not going to stand for this. I think that's really where the power comes from.
There's power in numbers, and there's power in people rallying together and recognizing the problem and looking to eradicate it. And I think by creating that circle of trust, as you call it, in that safe environment within your classroom, hopefully bullying won't even be in the conversation. And people will recognize, no, these are my friends, these are my classmates, and why would I pick on them and call them names? Because everyone goes through things and everyone has their flaws, but that doesn't mean you have to point them out.
Yeah. And like you were saying before, how surprising, one of my most quiet students, I remember one year, she was so quiet, and it was early in the year, and we did this, and she read, it was an essay, like a This I Believe, NPR's This I Believe essay. And she's talking about, that she believes in second chances, and she goes through this whole divorce story. And it was just, this incredibly hard time in her life, and it was still fresh, and her tears were coming. And I'm looking, and we're in a circle, so they all can see her, and she's not hiding behind anybody, in regular traditional. I think the circle is important. And I look around, and everybody else is crying too. And immediately they're raising their hand and being like, I so can relate with you. I didn't know you were going through that last year, and I've known you since kindergarten. How can you bully someone? You couldn't in that moment. And even if someone wanted to say something about her, you are coming against a whole class. I think that once people connect with one another and realize, like you said, I've known you since kindergarten. I didn't know that you even had that in you. That's where I think a lot of those issues cease to exist, because it's a connection on a different level. I think that when people bully somebody else, it's because you don't know them. You're afraid of the unknown, right? And so when you have someone, whether we're talking about religion or race or even gender, a lot of times disability, you have people that just don't have any connection or understanding of that other, so it's fear, and the fear is what's driving the hatred.
So this has been so awesome, so impactful. It's been great just catching up with you, and I was just listening to you talk and hearing the stories, and it just brought me back to those days in your room when we would all be on the couch using our flip camcorders to record and in the hallways just doing silly things. And it's truly like a full circle moment to be here and to speak to you and to reflect and just to hear the work that you've continued to do. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I'm so proud of you. And it's been such a great catch up.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gruca, for interviewing with me and just having a chat and open conversation about how educators can use the tools that they have to really connect with students and introduce them to some of the passions and the different outlets that are out there in the world. It's been amazing. I appreciate your time, and we'll chat soon.
Excellent. Thank you.